All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Buckeye Mike. We are live across multiple platforms. We are live currently on, obviously, YouTube, where some of you are probably watching us now. We are live on Twitter, Facebook. I don't believe I hit LinkedIn for this one, but we are on multiple platforms, and I appreciate everyone tuning in tonight as we have a super special guest with us tonight. We have Jordan Bowman from Voice of College Football, who covers, obviously, as we're covering tonight, the Clemson Tigers. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you, man. I'm just happy to be on. We're like 3-4 weeks away from college football, so it's content creation season is starting to ramp up, and I'm just happy to help out and do this with you because I always like talking ball.
It's definitely approaching, and it's an itch. It's ready to be scratched, if you know what I mean.
No, I feel you. It's and we need it. I mean, with everything that's going on with conference realignment and all the extra stuff, off the field stuff, I think college football fans are just ready to see their teams on the field. So, when we preview season starts rolling around, that's how you know it's close.
Oh yeah. So jumping right in here, what is the tone or the fan opinion of the program and Dabo Sweeney? Name almost slipped my mind.
Yeah, and that's almost like a two-parter question because the fan the fan opinion of Dabo and the program are kind of separate, but also kind of one and the same, and you kind of have to look at them differently. But I think just knowing what the fan base has gone through these past two seasons, gone through like they had a horrific time. But obviously, the past two seasons weren't up to the standard that Dabo Sweeney has set for this program. And the struggles on offense, missing the playoff, 2021 to win the ACC championship. So I think that the fan base is looking to get back to what we were used to seeing, from the 2015, 2020 through 2020 season, where it looked fun to play for that program, and especially on offense. And I think the fusion, the excitement from hiring Garrett Riley and first-year starter Cade Klubnik coming in as well, I think it's huge. It's really huge for the program, and you're kind of seeing it kind of feels like a new chapter, sort of, or like a new step in kind of what Clemson football is. So I think the fan base is pretty excited, cautiously, because they know obviously the last 5-star quarterback you had didn't really work out like you thought. So I think it's just kind of a wait and see. But I think the expectation for this program is to kind of get back to more of what we were used to seeing from 2015 through 2020.
Speaking of the last 5-star quarterback, what's your take on the comments that he made once he went to Oregon State on the style of offense and the offense that Clemson runs?
I mean, there was a lot of merit to it. And it was he was kind of echoing a lot of what Clemson fans have been saying for the past two seasons. I mean, from the kind of the lack of innovation, the kind of staleness of the offense, it was bloated. It felt like the offense was trying to be a jack of all trades, but a master of none type of offense. And because of that, they were extremely predictable. And I mean, you kind of saw it last year in their biggest games. Notre Dame obviously completely shut them down. The South Carolina game and obviously the Tennessee game and the Orange Bowl. But I mean, they all had very, very common themes. It was a lack of dedication to running the ball with Will Shipley and Phil Maffa and the talented running backs you have, and putting the game into your struggling quarterback's hands. And just the kind of lack of adjustments, the lack of innovation on offense really hurt this program the past 2 seasons. So, I mean, when DJ came out and said all that stuff, it didn't surprise me. And I think while he didn't play well a lot of times, it wasn't completely all on him. And this is kind of, Dabo Swinney going out and making the move he did this offseason kind of tells you all you need to know. Hey, things were not all well and good, and it wasn't just the quarterback play that was hindering this offense. So they're looking to kind of revitalize this program on that side of the ball.
So what does the defense look like coming into 2023?
I think there's a lot of excitement from the defense. I think there's some question marks, obviously, losing guys like KJ Henry and Brian Brzee and Miles Murphy to the NFL draft, Trenton Simpson at linebacker to the NFL draft. But I think there's a sentiment in the fan base that the defense didn't always play up to its standard last year. It was a good defense, but it wasn't the elite defense that maybe it was propped up to be going into that season. And so second year defensive coordinator Wes Goodwin kind of filling in the shoes for Brent Venables. I think he's learned a lot. He's talked about it this offseason. It's kind of that first season for him was a huge there was a huge learning curve as far as his preparation, his routine, all of that. And really just kind of stepping into being a Power 5 defensive coordinator, because obviously he had never called plays defensively before. That was his first season. But I think the future is bright. He spent a lot of time under Brent Venables before taking the job. And I think there's a lot of excitement with the young pieces that this defense is going to have this year. I think that the defensive line class, especially from the freshmen, is looking to kind of rejuvenate this defensive line, and also I think the return and the experience that you get at D tackle with Tyler Davis and Rukaroro. You have a lot of guys coming back in the secondary, so you're just. I think I think that you probably have the best linebacker duo in the country with Barrett Carter and Jeremiah Trotter Jr. So the defense as a whole looks to be a really strong unit in 2023. I think there's some question marks at who steps up at edge. You obviously bring back Xavier Thomas for a 6th season. Hopefully he finally has that big year that Clemson fans have all been waiting for, and injuries and other personal setbacks have kind of hurt him these past few years, but he looks in the best shape he's ever been. But now it's just all about who steps up. The opposite of him, is it Justin Maskell, another 6-year guy? Is it one of the true freshmen? Obviously, Peter Woods is one of the most highly touted freshmen in the class. But all in all, I think there's a lot of excitement about this defense, and I think it should be a very strong unit in 2023.
So as far as both sides of the ball, where do you think the strengths are, and what do you think are the key weaknesses against Clemson?
Okay, so I'll start with the offense. Obviously, I think I won't call it a weakness, but the big unknown still is Cade Klubnik, because he came in, played sparingly throughout the season, had his first real action, like extended action, the ACC championship game. He played really well. Obviously, Clemson went on to win that game in pretty comfortable fashion. But then his first start in the Orange Bowl didn't go quite as well. So we kind of have a limited sample size. You don't really know, but he's as talented as it gets. He was the number 1, number 2 quarterback in his class. But obviously, that's still an unknown with a first-year starter. And then I think the big thing that Clemson fans are looking to see kind of have a bounce-back season is the wide receiver room. Clemson has always branded itself as wide receiver U, with all the tradition at wide receiver that they've had. But the past couple of seasons, that position group has been arguably the weakest on the offense. And so I think those quarterback, wide receiver, I think those are big question marks. You bring back Antonio Williams going into his 2nd season, led the team as a true freshman. the team is really, really high on him. He showed a lot, came in extremely advanced. And so we're looking to see if he makes that jump from year 1 to year 2. Bo Collins is a guy that has been on the field, a really reliable playmaker, but it's all about staying healthy for him. And then there's a lot of other guys in this room that are unproven but really highly talented. Adam Randall was a true freshman last year, coming off a torn ACL, and kind of tried to work his way back towards the end of the year, but we haven't really gotten to see his full potential. The staff has raved about him. So really, it's just who steps up in that wide receiver room. So quarterback, wide receiver. I think the strengths of the offense are obviously, I think, first and foremost, the running backs. I think bringing back Will Shipley, one of the best running backs in the country, and also Phil Moffitt to pair along with him, I think is really, really big. And then you return 4 or 5 starters on the offensive line, and you also bring back former 5-star tight end Jake Brenningstool. So I think there's a lot of pieces here for this offense to be really strong, with Garrett Riley coming in and implementing his system. So the offense is there's a lot of reason to be excited about this offense and kind of the improvements they make from last season. And then on the defensive side of the ball, I would say the biggest question mark is probably edge, as I said earlier, with kind of, Xavier Thomas, really good when he plays, but he's had his issues and staying healthy and staying on the field. And you don't really know who's going to step up, opposite of him. But the strengths, you're going to have really, really experienced defensive tackles, a really deep defensive tackle room. And the linebackers, I think, especially, are going to be really strong as well. So I think the big question mark is obviously the defensive ends, but I think the defense as a whole is going to be really, really strong and should make it a jump from last season. I can't hear you. I think you're muted.
Sorry. I kind of want to shift a little bit because it's up in the air of who will go where, if you kind of catch my drift of the question. And, there are rumors that you guys are going to be in the lump to be part of the next ones to come to the Big Ten between you, Florida State, Oregon, and Washington. What is your take on this round of possible realignment? Do you like the idea of coming up here? If the ACC dissolves, which a lot of people, including myself, think that it will, I think that it'll last longer than the Pac-12. I think the Pac-12 is on the brink of absolute destruction and disappearance, at least to some degree. Whereas I see the ACC lasting to at least 2035-ish, and that's just a nice, I like the ACC better than the Pac kind of guess, I think, because I've said the Pac would be around till 2030. But so what's your take on the whole thing?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of rumors swirling around right now. It's a lot of uncertainty within the ACC right now. Florida State obviously just had a board of regents or a board of trustees meeting today where they basically just aired out that they were actively seeking ways to leave the conference. So there's a lot of unrest within the ACC right now. I think from the Clemson perspective, obviously, I think a lot of the fan base really more culturally and all of that aligns more with the SEC and would prefer to be in the SEC. Just more natural rivals. Obviously, geographically, you're just closer to all of that. But I do think that Clemson can't afford to just kind of sit and wait. I don't think. And I think there are steps being made. They haven't been as upfront about it as Florida State, but there are steps being made behind the scenes and for Clemson as well. And it wouldn't surprise me if the two schools are working in lockstep to possibly leave as exit partners. But I do know that Clemson can't afford to stay in the conference, at least the way that things are trending, unless there's some very unforeseen drastic change in the college football landscape. Because, in the future, I think for the next few years, I think Clemson can could theoretically operate within the ACC and not really feel the effects of the deficit that they're at when it comes, compared to the SEC and the Big Ten when it comes to the media rights deal and the money they're going to be making per year. But when you get farther and farther into the future, I think you're really going to start to see that gap widen, and it's already widening. And I think Clemson can't afford to sit and wait. I think they need to be proactive, and I think they are taking the steps necessary. And I think if it means joining the Big Ten, I think that's what you got to do, because at the end of the day, would it be most fans' preference? Probably not. But I do think there are some really positives to come out of it. Obviously, you would be in a really, really good state financially for the foreseeable future, and you'll be able to still compete for national championships and conference championships. So I think that's kind of the goal. Football is the driving sport in all of this, and in other ways, I mean, I think Clemson aligns a little bit more with the Big Ten in some ways because of the non-revenue sports that they sponsor, like lacrosse and men's soccer, things that aren't necessarily sponsored by the SEC. So I do think there are some pros and cons as far as Clemson joining the Big Ten. I guess the real question is, AAU membership. That's been something that's been floating around. I do think Clemson has been taking steps to do that as well. But at the end of the day, I think you do what you got to do. If the Big Ten is willing to put out an invite, I think you jump at it and you take it, because I think this is the ACC is not in a position to really better their situation anytime soon.
Yeah, because I mean, I don't know the full details of the ACC grant of rights, and like that's the part I hate about doing these interviews. I basically scramble and just put it together. I don't really like pull notes together. But if I remember correctly, the ACC grant of rights is like chump change for each school compared to the other conferences.
Oh, yeah.
And you guys are supposedly locked in until 2036. If I remember, it's like, what, 23 million or something per school? Or is it the whole conference?
I think it's closer. I think it's closer to 30 million, but it's not going to be growing as fast as the other conferences, and they're not even at the same price level to begin with. And I think you're going to be continuously operating at a deficit more and more as the years go on, and that builds up. And Clemson can't afford to be that. Clemson is a program that spends and cares about football, and that the investments that they've made to be in the position they're in as a national title caliber program is something that they don't want to let go of. And I think, like I said, football is the money driver. It's the end all be all in all of this. So whatever you have to do to ensure that your football future is in good hands, you have to do. And you can't afford to be making half of what your competitors in the SEC, especially, but also the Big Ten are making.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just you, it's basically everybody I've interviewed that have talked about this whole realignment possibility. Everybody seems to be going back to the football perspective. Is it possible that we see realignment moves made to where it's just like football and basketball moves, where like the ACC can survive, but it's a Notre Dame style of transition to where like Clemson, Florida State come over to the Big Ten for basketball and football, but they stay in the ACC for all the other sports.
That's something I haven't really thought about. I think logistically that would be interesting to see how that would play out because of the varying TV deals and rights and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, Notre Dame has managed to do it, but it'd be kind of hard for the conferences to kind of justify that. Like if the
True.
Big Ten wanted to take Clemson and Florida State, I don't think they would be okay with just Well, I don't. Maybe they would. Maybe they would, but I'm not. I don't. I feel like they wouldn't be okay with just taking them just for football because then you're missing out on money elsewhere. But I do think that would be something interesting to think about. I really am kind of in the mindset that in the future you won't have a governing body called the NCAA, at least over current Power 5 football in the future. And I could see, especially the upper echelon of the Power 5 breaking away, the programs that spend the most and care the most about football breaking away and forming their own governing body. I think that would be something that would actually kind of move the needle and kind of change things up a little bit. And maybe you're in a different situation financially without the NCAA over your head and all of that. But at the end of the day, I think we're all just speculating because we have no say in any of these decisions. The fans don't really get a say. They don't really care. The higher ups don't really care about the average college football fan. It's about what puts us in the best position to make money, and those are the moves that are going to be made. So at the end of the day, we'll have to see.
Yeah, I mean, I've had enough conversations, and it's like, shame on me because I never thought about it much before, but I vaguely remember something about like when USC and UCLA decided, hey, we're going to go east, that there were talks about USC and UCLA wanting to stay in the Pac for the smaller sports because of the travel issues. But when you think specifically Clemson and Florida State or any of the schools that we possibly could pull from the ACC, I don't really, to your point, I don't really see that being an issue just because we're on the same side of the coast.
Right. It does logistically still, intrigue you, especially when it comes to Florida State, because, Clemson and Florida State, they're considered geographically. I mean, we're kind of talking about them like they're geographically close. They're 7 hours apart. And if you're taking, Florida State, traveling all the way up to Rutgers or, Michigan State or somewhere, that's a long flight. You're just kind of you're going south to north instead of west to east, and it's still a really, 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 really big change as far as travel and all that. But I think, with the modern technology and all of that, I do think that that's something that will be mitigated to a degree. And so I think travel would make things really interesting for travel, especially for the non-revenue sports. But I do think that's something that's a price that these schools are willing to pay in order to ensure that football wise they're in a really, really good spot. And plus, I do think there's obviously the Big Ten is a really prestigious athletic conference and not just football. So the opportunity to play against really good programs in other sports like soccer and sports like that is still really, really intriguing for Clemson and Florida State. So, yeah,
absolutely. So let's go ahead and get into the meat of the conversation. Before we transition over to the schedule, let's go ahead and have a word from our sponsor.
full of fakes. How do you avoid buying fake items that look just like the real thing? Are you getting faked over? Experts say it's all in the details.
Big thank you to eBay for being our channel sponsor over at Buckeye Mike and being a sponsor for Shady Sports Network, our partners. The link in the description to use the eBay code is down below at checkout. Please do not forget to use the link for a discount on eBay. Thank you very much. Before we get into schedule talk, friend of the show, Willems, says, I think it'd be cool to play Clemson in the Big Ten. I completely agree. It would be cool. So going into the season, this is kind of where I stand. I think the ceiling could be 11-1, and I think the floor could be 9-3. It just kind of glancing over the schedule, I firmly believe that Florida State will be a loss. That's okay, because I think if it is 11-1, then I think you guys will be right back there to play Florida State in the ACC championship. So then it's just a matter of, can you beat them? The other ones, I see North Carolina, although that could be a quote-unquote trap game because it is right before South Carolina. And Notre Dame. It depends on if Notre Dame does what I think they will do and beat Ohio State and kind of ride that wave.
Yeah. I mean, those are the big games that kind of jump off the page. Obviously, the Florida State game in week 4 is obviously, I think, probably the most important game on Clemson's schedule. But I think when you look at the totality of the schedule of the home, as a whole, I do think Clemson will be favored in every game. I think they're I think they're a 3-point favorite, home favorite right now over Florida State. I do think your toughest games are at home, and I think that's kind of the big benefit, which is why I think the ceiling could be 12-0 if the offense, makes the kind of jump that Garrett Riley made at TCU, and so I think those games are kind of the linchpin of the entire schedule, because I do think you should be able to take care of business in most of your other games. Obviously, the game at NC State is really interesting. It's always tough to play up there, and obviously going to South Carolina at the end of the year, a team that beat Clemson last year, at home is a really, really important game as well. But I do think Florida State and Notre Dame, I think those are probably the two best teams on Clemson's schedule. And Florida State obviously is a resurgent program, brings back a ton of talent, done a lot of work in the transfer portal. So that's going to be a pretty momentous game. I'm really interested to see how they look in that week 1 matchup against LSU. But I think for Clemson, I think the expectation should be to take care of business, and I think 11-1 is kind of where I sit as far as a record, but it all depends on the steps that Cade Klubnik has made in year 2, and how much of Garrett Riley's philosophy kind of takes hold of the program in his first season. So. But I do think this is, in some ways, a tougher schedule that Clemson has had in recent years. But I think that's just because of I think your conference schedule has gotten better with the elimination of divisions, and the amount of quality quarterbacks you're going to be facing. And I think that kind of jumps off the page. I mean, Jordan Travis, Drake May, Spencer Rattler, Sam Hartman at Notre Dame, not Phil Jurkovec, but Brennan Armstrong at NC State. You're going to be right, and I didn't even mention the opener at Duke with Riley Leonard. So I think that you're going to be facing a lot of really, really high caliber quarterbacks, and I think that's kind of where you could get tripped up, because anytime you're playing a really good quarterback and they have a good day, they're tough to beat. So I think that's kind of where the balance, the weight or the balance of Clemson's schedule really kind of hangs.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's hard to see. It's kind of hard to see Clemson winning the Duke game. I mean, I guess he could, but I just feel like there's too many questions right now that we don't know the answers to. And I mean, Ohio State, for example, is in the same boat. I mean, new quarterbacks, questions on the offensive line, questions on the defense. The fan base is kind of torn with the coach. So, I mean, even with the similarities, Duke is Duke to me, as far as football. Duke always likes to Duke, and that's why I do think Clemson will win, whether it's a close, nail-biting game. Because my question is, like, do we see another Georgia-Clemson performance from 2 years ago?
I would hope not. You're not playing Georgia's the 2021 Georgia defense. That'd be really disappointing. But I wouldn't expect that. I mean, you go back to even last season, the opener against Georgia Tech, you put up 41.
True.
So I think that was kind of just you played that 2021 Georgia game. You played a national championship generational defense in a year where you weren't very particularly suited to face that kind of team. And even then, you still only lost by 7 points. The difference in the game was a pick six. But you're not playing that kind of team in week one. Duke is obviously they're experienced. They bring back a lot of talent, especially on offense. Experience on offense, at least, and they bring back one of the better quarterbacks in the league. But at the end of the day, if you're Clemson, and the talent profile is pretty much, it's not comparable. I think you should expect to be better than them on the lines of scrimmage. I think even with the question mark that is Cade Klubnik, I think you know what you're getting out of your running backs. And this was a really good rushing offense last year. Garrett Riley is as much credit as he got for the explosive passing offense that TCU had last year. They were a 55-45 run to pass team, and Kendre Miller ran for like 1,400 yards last year. And Max Duggan added 600, and their second back ran for like 700 as well. So they were a really strong rushing offense, and I think Clemson. I think that should continue under Garrett Riley. So I think if you were able to lean on that, you should be able to take care of business against Duke, as long as the defense doesn't completely implode. So, but it's a game you have to take seriously because of the experience and the quarterback you're facing.
Do you like the addition of Garrett Riley?
Oh, 100%. And I think when you make a coordinator hire like this, I mean, at Clemson, there haven't been many, because Dabo is obviously he's made a lot of internal promotions. That's kind of how he likes to do things. He likes to develop his guys and give them the opportunity when they're ready. But obviously, from the past 2 seasons, this Clemson offense needed a change in philosophy, a complete revamp. And Garrett Riley is about as good as it gets as far as who was on the market last year. I think it was the biggest coordinator hire in college football. And I think I think when you go back to last season, I think there were a lot of comparisons of when Miami got Josh Gaddis, former Broyles Award winner, all of that. But there were people behind the scenes that were like, Jim Harbaugh was kind of calling the plays, and he's not really that good. You didn't get that with Garrett Riley. It's just from media to behind the scenes, the coaches to the fans, it was a slam dunk hire, I think. And I think just from the returns that we've gotten over this offseason from spring and heading into fall, I think the team is really bought in, and they're really excited. And I think there's a lot to I think you're going to see a lot different Clemson offense in 2023. So yeah, I think the Garrett Riley hire was huge, and it was something that needed to happen. And I'm excited to see how much it pays dividends in this season.
Yeah, I mean, like we said, Florida State, Notre Dame, South Carolina, those are your big three road bumps in this schedule, so to speak. The rest of it, I mean, Duke, like we said, is Duke. Charleston Southern, FCS school. FAU, group of 5. You're going to run through them, should run through them. Syracuse. Now, Syracuse, it's at Syracuse, so that one could be a stickler because Syracuse, with you guys, has been known every once in a while to just wake up and be like, whoa, hey, we got a football game today. Let's go kick some butt.
Yeah. Especially last year. That was a tight game, and you had to bench DJ and just to get some stability and to come back and win that game. Syracuse. Listen, I never count them out, especially with Dino Babers there. They've just kind of been a sort of thorn in Clemson's side. They've only beaten them once back in 2017, but a lot of those matchups have been close. I mean, the last year was a tight one. The year before that was tight. Even in 2020, the score was lopsided, but it was a pretty close game until the fourth quarter. So Syracuse just they have a knack of waking up. Dino Babers always gets them up to play Clemson. I don't know if it's just because Clemson is the current top dog in the conference and they just want to be giant killers that day, or it's something about Clemson specifically. But hey, listen, I never count out Syracuse, especially when you go up to the Carrier Dome. Well, it's not the Carrier Dome anymore. It's the JMA Wireless Dome. I hate that they changed the name, but
it's still the Carrier Dome.
Still the Carrier Dome to me in all of our hearts. But it's a weird place to play, and I've talked about it with my co-host over at Voice of College Football Clemson, Tiger Paul Craven. Because he used to live in upstate New York, and he's been to a Clemson Syracuse game, and the dome is like there's not a lot of people, but you are so like on top of the field. It feels like it's a lot louder than the capacity says it should be, and it's tight, it's claustrophobic. It's just a really, really weird environment, and it gets really, really loud. So, listen, I never count out Syracuse, especially when Clemson has to travel up there.
Yeah, I mean, I always think about was it Deshaun's last year, or was that
when they lost?
Yeah, it was like Dino's first year.
That was 2017. That was Kelly Bryant. That was the Kelly Bryant season.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, when he shouldn't have been playing. He was concussed, and Clemson had to put in Hunter Johnson and Zaire Cooper. That was a disastrous game.
Wasn't it COVID year, or was it the year after COVID? Because it was Trevor Lawrence, but it was at home for you guys too. It was close. You guys won.
In 2020, yeah, that was the one that. There was one in 2018. In 2018, the national championship year, when Syracuse, that was the year Syracuse actually won 10 games. They're a pretty good squad, but they came into Death Valley and gave Clemson all they could handle. Knocked Trevor Lawrence out in the second quarter. Chase Bryce came in as the backup and had to lead them to a comeback victory. Threw a huge fourth and 6 pass to T. Higgins to keep that game-winning drive alive. And basically saved Clemson's national championship season, because they went and ran through the rest of their schedule and won the national championship. So Syracuse has given Clemson a lot of trouble over the years. So it's always you're always kind of like, this should be a win by 25 points, but you just kind of have that feeling in the back of your head. It's like, nah, they're gonna make this difficult for no reason, aren't they?
Yeah. Go in thinking, oh, we're going to win by 4 touchdowns. Come out the game. I'm glad we won, but man.
Final score 23-20 or something like that.
Yeah, we only win by like 10 points, and it's like, oh, we got lucky.
That's how it goes. That's how it goes with Syracuse. But yeah, never count them out.
So, I mean, from there, it's kind of like you got 3 easy games the next 4 weeks. You got, well, technically 4, because you got Wake Forest. To me, that's a win. Wake Forest has kind of fallen off since 2 years ago, I think, because then they played Pitt in the –
Yeah, they went to the ACC championship game a couple of years ago. They weren't bad last year. I think they won 8 games. I mean, Wake Forest historically, that's a really good season for them, and Dave Clawson has been really consistent. But obviously, they've lost Sam Hartman to the transfer portal.
Yeah,
they lost some pieces offensively. So you don't really know what you're going to get. I mean, Dave Clawson has been consistent, and that offense has been really good through multiple quarterbacks. But at the end of the day, they're still an unknown, and they haven't beaten Clemson since 2008. So
basically, since Dabo's been the coach.
Yeah, literally.
And then you got the bye week. That's a win that doesn't count. Then you got the Hurricanes. They're kind of, to me, they're kind of down.
Oh, they're interesting because of the changes they've made, the coordinator changes. Obviously, first year of Mario Cristobal did not go the way that a lot of people expected, but he took inventory, said, all right, we're going to do it completely different this time around, fired both coordinators, made a complete overhaul, brought in a top 10 class recruiting. So I think there's opportunity for Miami, because that's still a really talented roster. There's opportunity for Miami to have a bounce back season. But, at the end of the day, we said that a lot about Miami over the years. So it's kind of I'll believe it when I see it type of thing. So I think that you should go in and expect to win that game.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. They've been so. My theory is that we, being Ohio State, kind of broke Miami in 2003, because they've kind of been downhill since, and then all of a sudden they just pop back up in 2017, have a miraculous year, and ever since then they just kind of have gone back down.
Yeah, they're a program that's kind of been they've kind of struggled from an administrative and coaching standpoint to get really the full buy-in that they used to have, and that's kind of the product on the field has shown. They've been able to recruit pretty well, but they've lagged behind in other areas, and that's really hurt them over the last 15 or so years. And I do think that was kind of that Fiesta Bowl, the national championship, was a big turning point. But I also think when they demolished the Orange Bowl, I remember they got their last game in the Orange Bowl, they got shut out by Virginia. I think it was like 48-0 or something, 49-0. In their last game, just really, really sad. And that, I think, felt like that was kind of the death of the U that a lot of people grew up knowing. So they're trying to get that back. I do think Mario Cristobal, I think he's still a good fit for Miami, but I think a lot is riding on this season, because I think you got to start showing proof of concept because of how bad last season was, because you're not going to be able to just keep selling recruits on you'll be the change, but then when they get there, it's still the same old, winning 6-7 games at best, or even missing a bowl game at their worst, and not really ascending to being one of the contenders in the ACC. So we'll see about them, but I do think that's a game that Clemson should win handily. They did it last year, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. Like you said, Mario Cristobal is definitely the right hire to bring in and turn the program around. I do think that's kind of why Oregon Oregon hired him for the same reasons. And then we saw what he did there, beating Ohio State in the shoe, and the rest is history. And now he's down south with the beautiful, beautiful sandy beaches.
Yeah. Yeah, he's back, back in his old stomping grounds. So, but we'll see how it goes. The Mario Cristobal experiment is still ongoing. So we'll see how it
Just, my biggest thing with bringing new coaches in is let's actually give them time to try to build what they're trying to build, and not
Right.
this, because like I get what you're saying, but like the way you said it to me was like, well, if they go 5-7 or 6-6 and then don't win their bowl game, he could either be on the hot seat next year or he could just be gone at Miami next year. And that's how you keep your program where Miami's mostly been.
I agree. I totally agree, and I wouldn't agree with. I do think that there are sometimes, especially you have to do some self inventory, kind of look yourself in the mirror and be like, okay, we can't keep doing this. I think Florida State learned their lesson when they fired Willie Taggart after 2 seasons. That really does a number on your roster. And when Mike Norvell got there, the roster was in bad shape. They had a lot of guys transfer out, a lot of guys that didn't develop just due to poor development. The recruiting classes weren't great. And Mike Norvell was in just a really, really bad situation to start, and especially when you couple that with COVID his first season. But they gave him time. He lost. He won 3 games his first year. He went 5-7 his second year. And people were like, "Oh, Mike Norvell's got to, he's on the hot seat and all of that." But internally, they were like, "We believe in what he's doing. He's installing his culture, his system. It's going to take time." And then last season, you saw it jump. They made that huge jump and won 10 games. I think Miami has to have that similar type of patience because. But I think the problem is in this day and age of college football with the transfer portal, everybody wants the microwave dynasty type of thing where it's like, oh, if our roster sucks, just go and get guys from the portal. There's no excuse why you should suck next year. And if you do suck, you're gone. And that's the kind of those are the kind of issues and kind of the impatience that hurts a lot of programs that are trying to get back to national prominence. So I think the transfer portal and NIL have definitely made coaching a lot more, especially when you're taking over a new program. It's made it a lot more of a expedited process as far as the rebuild and all of that, because you only have so much time.
Yeah, it's crazy the way that these college or universities and programs cycle through coaches so quickly, and then the fan base is like, man, we suck. Why do we suck so much?
Yep.
You suck because every time you bring in a coach, you give him 2 years because you have this like short-term success expectation that doesn't work.
Right. And then each time you do it, it puts you farther and farther behind the 8 ball. So might as well you go through your, pick a guy that you truly believe in, let him go through the growing pains, because that's what it takes any program. I mean, that's what Clemson did with Dabo. He was not a popular hire. He was a former wide receivers coach. He went 6-7 his second full year and lost a bowl game to South Florida. He lost 5 straight to South Carolina. Stuff like that. But, you saw the improvements that Clemson was making, winning 10 games. They won the ACC for the first time in 20 years in 2011, and, beating LSU and Ohio State in bowl games the following 2 seasons. But you saw the climb, and the recruiting class started getting better. You got big time players, and obviously, getting Deshaun Watson in 2014 kind of put that, it was kind of the big addition, and then Clemson. The rest was history. So you just have to give these coaches time. And I think part of that is, administratively, you have to, the coach and the administration have to be in lockstep. They have to have an understanding of the expectations and what the ultimate goal for the program is. And the programs that do have that synergy are the ones that are winning national titles. Look at Kirby Smart at Georgia. Obviously, Nick Saban is the golden example of that, and Dabo is definitely an example of it as well. Those are the coaches that are they have an understanding with the administration. The administration is like, whatever you need, we'll get it for you. We're trying to win championships, and we're going to give you the time to do it.
Yeah, so to kind of finish up on the schedule, because we talked a little bit about NC State and we talked a little bit about Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame on the schedule for Clemson, touching back on that, has kind of become Wake Forest on a better standard because of bringing in Hartman. And yes, you lose the infamous tight end, Michael Mayer. You lose good receivers and key pieces across the whole team, but I still think that what Notre Dame has is capable enough to either competing with Clemson this year or even pulling.
They beat them last year and beat them good. So I think, and I said this. I think a lot of people talk about the Florida State game, but I think Notre Dame is the most complete, is possibly the most complete team on Clemson's schedule. I think just because of the roster, I think the roster talent that Notre Dame has right now is better than Florida State's. Florida State has really good starters, but the depth is still kind of questionable. But Notre Dame, when you look at the overall talent roster, they're what, a 60-something% blue chip ratio. They finally, they're going to have good quarterback play. Well, presumably have good quarterback play this year. They always have a really good offensive line. They might have the best offensive tackle duo in the country. They're going to have really, really, really good running backs. Audric Estime was a nightmare for Clemson to tackle last year. And we'll see about the defense. Al Golden was always an interesting hire for me. At defensive coordinator, and they had their issues, but at times last year. So I'm interested to see kind of what the progression is from year one to year two. But I also think there's a lot of excitement at Notre Dame about their receivers, and that's something they haven't been able to say for a while. Tobias Merriweather and Jaden Thomas, guys like that, that are really looking to kind of step into bigger roles. I think Chanty Stuckey, their wide receiver coach, former Clemson player, by the way, has done a really good job, an underrated job with that wide receiver unit. And so Notre Dame with a really good passing attack, along with that running game that they have, that's going to be tough to stop. And I think it's fortunate you get them coming to Clemson instead of going up to South Bend this time around. So I tell the fan base all the time, I think Clemson is definitely going to take that game seriously because they beat you last year. You want to get your get back. But I still think that game against Notre Dame has kind of been overlooked.
Yeah, and then Georgia Tech is next, and that team is just in absolute shambles. They haven't been the same since 2014 season when they beat Mississippi State in the Orange Bowl. Yeah. And then, as we touched on a little bit earlier, North Carolina, I think, bringing back most of their weapons, that could be interesting. And on top of the fact of, Drake may, depending on how his season goes, he could be a Heisman contender at that point. That would also make it difficult. And then, of course, the big one at the end of the year. So, yes, realistically, my floor is 9-3. I could see – no one's made the suggestion in the comments, but I can see a 7-5 floor. But that's just a floor. I don't think Clemson could be 7-5 by the end of the year.
That would be worst case scenario, like a disaster. type of scenario.
Someone
got hurt. I don't see
important got hurt.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Like, I don't see it happening to be 7-5 because a lot of things would have to go right for the opponents. And I mean, like you said, Florida State, at least the first time, if you catch them in the ACC championship game, it'll be different. First time Florida State, it's at home. Syracuse, it's on the road. That's tricky. Notre Dame, you catch them at home. NC State, it's a road game. North Carolina, it's at home. South Carolina, it's out there, but they've already proven they can beat you at home, so they would have the most confidence, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that's kind of there are landmines on this schedule, and obviously the chances of Clemson losing all of them and having like a 7-5 type season would be really, really surprising. But I do think that you're going to have to be able to navigate this schedule. And I think Clemson teams of old, I think this would have been a pretty this would be a pretty, I wouldn't say easy schedule, but wouldn't be too much of the expectation would be 11-1, 12-0, and not really think much about it. But there are ways that this season could be a multiple loss season like the past two have been. But the expectation is if your offense is anywhere more improved from last year and the defense is still really stout, you should be the favorite in every single one of your games. And that's and you should be able to win every single one of those games. And so I think this is obviously a really important season for the program as a whole because of the changes that you've made. And as we get, there's a lot of questions about whether Clemson is still, at that level that they have been. So I do think that getting back to the college football playoff is definitely attainable, but it's going to be a challenge, and it's all about how this team kind of progresses from last year and kind of puts all of that behind them and starts having fun again, because I think that's kind of been the missing thing. The last two seasons haven't looked very fun, especially on offense. And I think Garrett Riley and the infusion of excitement definitely is definitely going to be a huge help.
Yeah, and you brought up the infamous CFP. Do you think it just means more, not to steal the slogan from the SEC, but do you think it just means more being the last year of the 4-team? Like, if we look at it from a Big Ten perspective with the 12-team, once USC gets rolling, the Big Ten's roughly guaranteed 3 to 4 teams every year. The SEC is the same way. I mean, do you feel like Clemson and the ACC are at a disadvantage in the 12-team if they stay in the ACC? Maybe they end up being unlucky and having to run through an entire gauntlet of Big Ten or an entire gauntlet of SEC schools just to win a national championship.
I mean, possibly. Again, it's always. I mean, we're kind of we're spitballing here, but I do think that the 12-team playoff. If Clemson were to stay in the ACC, I think the 12-team playoff would be honestly, it would help in a lot of ways because you get a mulligan even if you lose 1 or 2 games. Because if Clemson, as long as Clemson takes care of business and wins their conference championship, maybe they're 10-11-2 or something like that, they're going to be one of the 6 highest rated conference championships more than likely. But obviously when you get there is kind of a different story. And obviously the road definitely gets tougher with more teams. Once you get there, because you got to win 3 or 4 games depending on whether or not you get a bye. So it definitely kind of changes the calculus a bit. But for the ACC as a whole, yes, it does put them at a disadvantage, because you're just not going to have too many. Your conference champion will pretty much always get in. But if the Big Ten and the SEC are continue to be as strong as they've been, it's going to be tough to have a second or third. Maybe you get a second, but it's definitely going to be tough to get a third or a fourth team in, if that's even if you have a team that you could reasonably consider for a playoff spot. So, yeah, I think in a lot of ways this season is a big deal just because it's the last of the 14 playoff. Clemson was a mainstay in it. They went 6 times in a row. They still are, despite missing the last 2 years, they're still second in playoff appearances and playoff wins. So I do think that kind of getting back to that and making it for that seventh time and seventh time in 10 seasons. I think that would be a really nice launching point heading into the 12-team playoff era.
Yeah. So to kind of hit the end portion here, let's kind of go through some of these comments. So Willems said Clemson's still a solid team this upcoming year, in my opinion. Definitely an 8 to 12 win squad. And I feel like, yes, they are solid. There are some questions that need answered throughout the season. And I think he's kind of hit it on the head, and we more or less agree with him that they are maybe more of a 9 to 12 win team, but definitely agree with him with the 8 to 12.
Yeah, I agree. But at the end of the day, and I think that, hey, if you go back to the last 2 seasons, well, especially last year, I mean, as much as you struggled last year, you went 8-0 in conference play.
Yeah,
I do think that the league has gotten better in some ways. I think the programs that are kind of in the middle have gotten better. I do think the bottom of the conference is getting worse, which is kind of why the perception is of the conference is as bad as it is, because I think there's just the bottom of the conference is just they don't really care about football, and they're just not investing the same as even some of the middle programs. Because I do think like an NC State and a Wake Forest, those are solid programs, and they care about football. They're never going to be at the national championship, college football playoff type of level, but they're still really strong teams. But I do think the bottom of the league has gotten worse. But I think Clemson is still going to be able to manage this schedule, especially within conference play. I do think your only real challenge is Florida State as far as conference play. They're the only program that has the combination of experience and talent on your conference schedule to really challenge you. Should be, but you never know. Obviously, North Carolina with Drake May is always a team to watch out for. But you handled them pretty well in the ACC championship last year, so the expectation should be to do that again.
Yeah,
this team is I think the expectation, I think, just from the standard of this program, is to win the ACC and be right back in the thick of the playoff race. So we'll see how it goes.
Yep. So Tigers J said breakout players.
Yeah. Breakout players. I'll pick a couple for offense. I think one I'll start with is tight end Jake Brenningstool. He's been, kind of the second guy for the past couple of seasons behind Davis Allen, who's now off to the league. But Jake, I think he offers a lot of versatility in the passing game. I think he's a guy that is a huge threat over the middle of the field, really, really nice vertical threat. And I think that's a piece that Garrett Riley is going to use a lot. And then another one is on offense, I think, will be Adam Randall, wide receiver. He is probably the most just athletically gifted receiver in the room, just from his size, the size and speed combination. He's just built like DK Metcalf. If you see pictures of him, he is something to behold. So, but he was the star of camp before he tore his ACL last season. And so I'm really excited to see him, a fully healthy version of him this year. And I think with Garrett Riley and, implementing his scheme and getting him opportunities with the ball, I think he's going to have a really strong year. And then on defense, I'm going to go. There's a lot of guys that you could really pick. You could pick some of the freshmen. Peter Woods, I think, is the big one. True freshman, former 5-star defensive lineman. It's Brent Venables, when he was recruiting him before he left Clemson, he called him the best defensive line prospect he's ever seen. That's really, really high praise. I think he's going to be a game breaker this year. And, I think it was a big win to get him out of the state of Alabama. And I think it's going to be hard to keep him off the field. So Peter Woods is one. And then I'll go for a more outside the box one. I'm going to go with true sophomore safety, Sherrod Covell. I think he came in, had some learning to do last season, but I think physically he is as gifted as it gets, and I think he's made a lot of strides this offseason to get a lot of playing time this year. He is a heavy hitter. He's going to be laying dudes out this year, and I'm really excited to see him kind of flying all over the field. So I'll go with those two. I could definitely name a bunch more on both sides of the ball, but I don't want to go too long.
So the next question, do you think Clemson is going to remain solid for the future, especially if they move to the Big Ten?
I think so. Clemson is still recruiting at the level that at a really, strong level. The talent on the roster on paper is actually better than it was, during the national championship seasons. Just from a team talent, if you go look at team talent composite, whether you put a lot of stock into that. But I think as long as Clemson is recruiting at the level they are, Dabo Swinney is the head coach, they're going to be a really strong team. And if they were to go to the Big Ten, I'd expect them to be right in the thick of the conversation. Would they win it every year? Yeah, definitely not. But they'd definitely be in that conversation to compete and win the Big Ten every year. And with the expanded playoff, you don't even need to win the conference. Especially, you'll have a really strong schedule, and you'll definitely get the benefit of the doubt over, say a Big 12 team that with a similar record. So, yeah, I think Clemson would be just fine in the Big Ten. I don't really have too many worries about that as long as they're recruiting at the level they are.
So Maddie Sims says South Carolina needs to be humbled. They win two games at the end of the season and act like they won back-to-back national championships.
Yeah, okay. I won't trash them too hard on here. I'm trying to be professional.
It's okay.
But yeah, South Carolina, listen, there is the program is definitely on the upswing. I think Shane Beamer has done a good job of implementing that culture. He's outperformed expectations 2 years in a row. And there's a lot of excitement around that program. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of where you get a lot of the chatter. And beating Clemson at home last year, ending their 40-game home win streak and kind of knocking them out of the playoff race. That's a tough pill to swallow. And you just got to tip your cap to them. But I do think Clemson is still the better program. Obviously, I think they're the better team this year. South Carolina has some questions of their own to answer. Offensive line and running back is going to be a huge question mark for them. They do bring back Spencer Rattler and some really talented receivers, but they also lost pieces on defense, especially in the front seven, that they're going to have to address. So I'm interested to see how they look because they do have some holes. I think a lot of people are kind of just expecting another jump from them, but I don't know. There are some question marks, and they have a really tough schedule. So if they win, 7-8 games again, I think that would be a really good year, but people would be like, oh, they didn't really improve. But I would disagree. But I think Clemson definitely needs to get their get back. It's the biggest rivalry. It's Clemson's biggest rival for a reason. You battle for you battle them for recruits all the time in state, and you definitely want to kind of maintain your position within the rivalry. So beating them this year is definitely one of the priorities.
So he also says, and I guess he broke it into two comments. He said SEC needs to add Florida State and Clemson ASAP, and then he says this assumes the Big 12 raids the Pac-9 and the Big seriously entertains Oregon and Washington. Now, before you go, all I will say is that they're going somewhere. Everybody is leaving the Pac and the ACC within the next 15 years, give or take. Everyone is leaving those two conferences. Unless the ACC can turn something around with the grant of rights.
Yeah.
But it's
doubt it.
already rumored that Florida State is 100% coming to the Big Ten. It's a matter of who are they bringing with them. Is it Clemson or is it Miami?
Or is it North Carolina? I think North Carolina. Honestly, if the Big Ten, I do think the Big Ten is seriously eyeing North Carolina because of the brand obviously is big, not so much in football, but just from a nationally, it's still a really big brand, and obviously it's a really strong academic school. AAU, all of that has kind of checks all the boxes that the Big Ten typically looks for in a case. So North Carolina would be up there as well. But to Maddie's comment, yeah, I agree. If the SEC, I mean, if I were the SEC, I'd be obviously you have to be more tactful. You can't just go and poach them and just be like, just send them an offer and poach them, because that opens you up to all sorts of lawsuits and stuff. But as soon as the opportunity arises, I do think that the SEC would be smart to reach out. But Florida State definitely is. They are trying to put those signals out, and I think they would like to join the Big Ten if possible. And I think Clemson is the same way if that opportunity comes. We'll see. I don't think Florida State. If Florida State goes to the Big Ten, they're definitely not going alone. I think obviously they're going to have a partner. From the comments that today during their Board of Trustees meeting, and they're at Michael Alford, he kept referencing Clemson, and he was talking about how Florida State drives the Florida State and Clemson, and then he kind of quickly said and others, but. It was clear he wasn't really supposed to name drop any other teams, and but he mentioned Clemson, kind of drive the media value of the conference. And obviously they're not getting the money proportional to their worth to the conference. And right. So I do think that Clemson and Florida State are definitely, they're at least communicating. I know that for a fact they are communicating about it, but we'll see if they end up, kind of going out together, or maybe it's somebody else.
Yeah, I mean, so my prediction is by 2028, you're going to have Florida State, Clemson, Oregon, Washington, Cal, and Stanford.
I was thinking that, yeah.
And maybe, depending on how high the Big Ten wants to go, maybe a Miami or North Carolina. Because those are both Miami and North Carolina. Miami has their AAU, which Mark talks about all the time.
Yeah.
And North Carolina, because from what I understand, what I've been told by multiple people, to join the Big Ten, you don't have to necessarily have the AAU. You have to show that you're trying to get the AAU.
Yeah, and it's definitely a conditional thing, and and that's kind of where I think Clemson would have an opportunity, because I do think they are. I know they're taking steps to be to kind of get the AAU invite. I think obviously that's a process, but if you have to, as long as you're showing that you're working towards that, I do think that the possible upside of bringing Clemson in the conference would be enough for the Big Ten to extend an invite. Same with Florida State; they're working to get their AAU invite as well. And then obviously Miami and North Carolina are really good academic institutions. Already AAU, they check a lot of boxes already. So I do think that would be, if those four all end up together, I think that would help a lot, as far as their transition in the conference, because then you have some regional buddies. Miami will have Florida State, and obviously Clemson and North Carolina are pretty geographically close as well, and all four of them are still in the South. So I think that would be a really big, really nice scenario. You get all the brands for the Big Ten. You get all the big brands of the ACC. I wonder what they think about Virginia. Virginia's always been kind of an interesting one, because they don't, from an athletic standpoint, they're not. They wouldn't be that attractive at least from the football part. I think they'd be a really good addition for, basketball wise. But the football part obviously is a really big deal. But academically, they're one of the best public schools in the country. So it's that I would be really intrigued to kind of see how they view Virginia if they were to ever reach out.
I don't know. That's a good question. So as we kind of wrap it up here, where can the people find you?
Yeah. So first of all, I'm on Twitter. Well, X now, at Jobo0209. That has the link to Voice of College Football Clemson. I host the All In show on Thursdays at 7 p.m. over there. So make sure you check that out. Just give me a follow on. I'm still calling it Twitter. I'm not calling it X.
Might as well. Everybody I talk to does.
Yeah. and hit that link in my bio, and it'll take you right to the channel, and you can watch the All In show, and make sure you subscribe while you're there, and all of that. But yeah, other than that, that's pretty much it.
All right. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on. Hopefully Clemson, I'm sure they will. Hopefully Clemson does good enough to make a bowl game, and maybe if things will work out.
I hope they make a bowl game. Good Lord, if they don't. We're having a whole different conversation.
Fire Dabo Sweeney.
Well, you'll get that from some of the fan base for sure. If you miss a bowl game,
I don't think he's missed a bowl game since he was hired. Maybe his first season, but
he didn't even miss. No, he went to the ACC championship game his first full season. They went to a bowl game his interim season. They went to a bowl game even in the 6 and 7 year, and then ever since they've won double-digit games. So, it's the second longest streak in college football. Hashtag fire Kirby. Yeah, I'm on that train. Yeah, let's do that. Fire Kirby.
Fire Kirby.
He's doing
hashtag fire Dabo. Fire Kirby.
No, I don't think they would. Yeah, but if Clemson were to somehow miss a bowl game, that would be incredible. One thing they don't, even before Dabo, that was not very normal. The last time they missed a bowl game was a self-imposed bowl ban after that South Carolina brawl in like 2003. So that would, both teams were like, okay, we kind of have to punish ourselves, and they both elected not to go to bowl games. But before that, you have to go back to 1998 to find a season Clemson missed a bowl game.
Crazy.
2004, I knew it was one of those seasons. No, because 2003 Clemson went to, that was the year they beat. I think that was the year they beat Tennessee in the Peach Bowl. That was a good year. But 2004. And before that, you have to go to 98. That was like Tommy West last season. Fine, Nick Saban, the fountain
of youth. Oh, that's funny.
Sorry, Maddie. You got 2 years tops. Yeah, say your goodbyes. No.
Really? You think he's gone in 2 years?
No, I think Nick Saban's going to coach as long as he feels like it. And I think he's not close to at least mentally, he doesn't feel like he's close to being done. But we'll see. But he's going to retire on his own terms for sure. I could definitely see him pulling a Joe Paterno and coach until he's like 80 if he wants.
Oh yeah, easily. He's already what, 75 or something?
70. I don't think he's that old. I think he's like 72, 71.
Whoops. Sorry,
but
man.
But still in the 70s, getting up there.
Well, all right. Anything else?
No, man. Just thank you for having me on. This is a blast. I always like coming on here and talking ball, and we've done it a lot over at Mark Rogers. So just nice to kind of bring it over here, and I'm glad I was able to come on and give you guys a little bit of insight on the Clemson program and contribute to this channel, because I think you're doing really good work, and I hope to see your channel grow. So again, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Later, y'all.
Later.
I'm a game changer.